It is early morning in the late Jurassic forest, and the wet season is in full swing. With so much fresh plant growth, different species of herbivores will often tolerate each other. A herd of Stegosaurs, Chungkingosaurus, is feeding on the low-lying shrubs, and amongst them are the swift Agilosaurus, picking out different fruits and seeds. As they have grazed in the early morning light, they have been joined by a herd of Mamenchisaurus. These large sauropods feed on the highest trees, and so don't compete with the smaller dinosaurs. However, the giants don't ever look where they are placing their feet, and so if any animal is in their path, it's entirely up to them to get out of the way. The Chungkingosaurus are small for Stegosaurs, at around 4 meters long, and they would do well to simply avoid the Mamenchisaurus altogether, but complex thinking is far beyond Stegosaurs, thanks to their rather small brains, which ironically is something they share with the huge sauropods. As the morning goes on, the herds mix, and soon many of the Chungkingosaurus have Mamenchisaurus all around them. The Agilosaurus are fleet of foot and easily able to avoid the sauropods' huge legs. They are in fact used to darting between herbivores much bigger than themselves. But the Chungkingosaurus now have to be more alert, and one of them looks around and realizes she is getting boxed in and begins to stress. She calls out to her herd and hears a return call to her left that is unfortunately blocked by one of the Mamenchisauruses. She starts to walk over anyway when another one of the giants nearly steps on her, its pillar-like leg landing centimeters away from her face. She is startled and instinctively swings her tail, slicing her spines across the giant's leg, but the larger herbivore's hide is so thick he barely feels it and hardly reacts to the wounds. As the female Chungkingosaurus trots around trying to get back to her herd, one of the Mamenchisaurus lowers his head to the Stegosaur's direction. Why he is putting his head so low to the ground isn't clear, but the Chungkingosaurus almost runs right into his face. She sidesteps and swings her tail in a wide arc and slashes it across the larger dinosaur's face, almost cutting his left eye. Pain coursed through the sauropod's skull, and he lifted his head up and let out a startled cry as he swung his neck, slamming it into one of his herdmates. This second Mamenchisaurus thought he was getting pushed to move forward, and the cry of pain he heard sounded like a warning of a predator. Hearing this, he let out his own warning cry and started to flee, pushing one of his herd out of the way. The call echoed throughout the herd, and soon every member was in a panic, trying to run from a threat that none of them could see, and amongst them all were the Chungkingosaurus. The Stegosaurs ran as dozens of legs threatened to crush them flat, their heads darting back and forth, trying to predict where the giant's feet would land. One Chungkingosaurus tried to move sideways out of the path of the stampede, but the front leg of a Mamenchisaurus came down and crushed his head and shoulders, killing him instantly. A female ran headfirst into a stationary leg, halting her, and as the limb lifted away, another stomped right next to her, startling her back into a sprint. Amongst them, Agilosaurus ran for their lives, running through the foliage, dodging Stegosaur and sauropod alike. One Chungkingosaurus found his way to the edge of the herd, when out of nowhere, a predator, Gasosaurus, lunged from the undergrowth and leapt onto the herbivore's side. As the predator bit down on his prey, the Chungkingosaurus was forced back into the stampede, and out of nowhere, the Gasosaurus was struck in the head by one of the Mamenchisaurus's tails and sent crashing to the ground. Before he could stand, another of the sauropod's legs stepped on his tail, crushing it. As the carnivore cried out in pain, the same sauropod's rear leg came up and flattened his upper body. The female Chungkingosaurus that started the incident pushed another of her herd sideways, and both of them escaped the path of the sauropods. They kept running till they tired out, the sound of the stampede still in the distance. The Mamenchisaurus would likely run till they became exhausted, never realizing there was no threat in the first place. Both herbivores had acted out of instinct, and it had cost the lives of 4 Chungkingosaurus, and scattered the rest. It would likely take days for them to regroup, and now a large path through the forest had been destroyed. Where the stampede had begun, and the first Chungkingosaurus was crushed, a predator is already on the scene. This sin raptor had in fact been stalking the herd, waiting for an opportunity, and having multiple bodies to clean off the floor is about as good an outcome as he could ask for. Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we will be breaking down Mr. Chunk himself, Chungkingosaurus. Chungkingosaurus was first discovered in 1977 in the Upper Shangmao Formation of China. It lived between 160 and 158 million years ago in the late Jurassic, a time when many basal stegosaurs roamed prehistoric China. It was one of the smallest stegosaurs, growing to between 4 and 5 meters long, and between 1.6 to 1.9 meters tall at the hip, weighing between 1,000 and 3,000 kilograms. Chungkingosaurus is seen as a more basal stegosaur, as its hips and humerus are quite primitive compared to later species. Its skull was also smaller and deeper with non-overlapping teeth. Like other stegosaurs, it had 2 rows of backplates that formed more into spines the further along its back. The total amount of plates is unknown, however reconstructions usually give it 14. It also had 2 pairs of thagomisers on the end of its tail, however a 3rd pair was reported on one specimen. Unfortunately, this was destroyed during excavation. Chungkingosaurus was closely related to other stegosaurs that lived alongside, like Chungkingosaurus and Hyangosaurus, and like them, it also had shoulder spines. Some other species it lived alongside include Chungkingosaurus, Mamenchisaurus, Omiosaurus, and Sinraptor. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot to say about Chungkingosaurus. But while I have you all here, do you know why the tail spikes are called thagomisers? Well, it's all because of this comic right here. Yes, scientists just kind of adopted this name from it, and these weapons are called thagomisers now. And if that doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what will. But what do you think of Chungkingosaurus? What lesser-known dinosaur would you like me to do a breakdown on next? And until then, thank you for watching.